What's good, Atlanta? This is the Blog and Dirty podcast, where Dirty Bird is the word if you haven't heard. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer, fanside.com. I may or may not have lied to you guys. Last week, I said that there wasn't going to be a show this week, but I was able to carve out some time on a Monday before I take some PTO ahead of the 4th of July. So there will be a show next week, normal time on Wednesday, and then there'll be another show next time after that. You're taking a lot of time off here in the early part of July, but I just want to shout out everybody here with Dirty Bird Nation. We now have 300 subscribers here on the channel in less than a year of this thing being a show. So hats off to each and every one of you for making this a reality. I really appreciate all the engagement, all the feedback, everything that I've gotten from everybody here following along with Blog and Dirty. So, yeah, I've got a little bit of an exciting show here. Kind of want to build off momentum, have a few things that I think are interesting to talk about today. Let's get started with some, you like that, big Penix energy. Yeah, we're going to combine both here. I came across this article that Mark Raimondi wrote for ESPN.com about, having Kirk Cousins on the roster with Michael Penix Jr. and what that could mean for the team. I think everybody, all my friends and family, everybody I work with keeps asking me, is Cousins going to really be a distraction here? And I think Raimondi did a really great job of he's got a really good pulse of what's going on with the situation. He asked a couple of questions within the context of his article. Will Cousins' presence be a distraction for Penix and the rest of the team? He said, no one in the organization seems to think that. And if they did, they wouldn't be telling you that. That's really the big thing here. They're not going to lead on if he is. And I think the other big thing is Cousins has always kind of been a team first guy. It's been this way throughout his career, in college at Michigan State, in the NFL with Washington, Minnesota, and now with Atlanta. Another question that Raimondi had was, how's Penix going to feel about Cousins still being on the roster? And I think it could kind of go, either way beyond that. And really the big thing here with this is he's got enough confidence as is to where he's not going to really care. This guy's a pro. This is an all pro type of player, former Pro Bowler guy. With Penix, is I won the Maxwell at Washington. I was number 8 overall pick. It doesn't matter if Cousins is on this team. It doesn't matter whoever's on this team. We're on this team together. And I think the other things that everybody keeps talking about with Cousins being on the team is, are they going to trade him? And I think at this point of the offseason, it's going to have to be a perfect storm. It's got to be a deal too good to pass up for Atlanta to capitalize on. Because, again, you have to remember that Cousins has a no-trade clause. And he has to waive that for that dream to become a reality. What you would basically need to happen is a starting quarterback of note needs to go down, needs to suffer a season-ending injury in training camp. We've seen things like that happen to Teddy Bridgewater in the past, Ryan Tannehill. There almost always seems to be one of note. But if something like that were to happen, then I could see Cousins being okay, I want to go to Team X. And then the Falcons are okay, let's make a deal happen here. But for the most part, I don't think that they would do it unless they got a Godfather offer. This is because Penix is still a young player. He had a lot of experience in college, but only 3 starts in the NFL. He didn't really put in a lot of work with the ones up until he got put into the starting role late last year. And then also he is a little bit injury prone in his career. He did miss some time in college with knee injuries. Also, we think he's got tremendous upside as the starting quarterback, but, wait till somebody gets some tape on him. I think it's important having a guy like Cousins in the room to be there to, help him kind of navigate through this. And I think, even though Cousins has basically kind of been painted as somewhat of a malcontent by the media, I think that's more of a fabrication with his representation. Again, he's always been a team first guy. So he may not be overly excited about this role here with the Falcons, but I think he knows he didn't play very well last year. He got hurt. He was coming off an injury, got hurt again, didn't play up to his standard, and played well up till about Halloween, and then he turned into a pumpkin. So, I think complacency is really the last thing that this team needs here. But, yes, I talked about this on a Wednesday show last week about him being on the Netflix show Quarterback. I think Joe Burrow is on that too. And at that point, if Joe Burrow is on it, like, I don't care if it's a distraction. Like, it's just they're trying to get like a good cross section of the NFL. And plus, I think in the day and age with everybody's expected to have some camera in their face, it's not going to be that big of a distraction. But really, I think the single biggest thing that I think Cousins can do to help Penix out is just give him some words of encouragement, give him a little bit of tips here and there within the context of being the starting quarterback in the NFL. Cousins and Penix know how to be a starting quarterback, but I think Penix has to learn how to do this at the highest level as opposed to a really high level there in college football. So yeah, I think for the most part, this is going to work out just fine. And I think everybody else outside of Flowery Branch or Dirty Bird Nation is going to be scratching their head about it. But I mean, that's just how it is. They don't have the pulse of this team like you and I do. They don't know what's going on. The haters are going to hate. And this is the Blogging Nerdy Podcast. So let's move on to our next topic here. Let's move on and let's put some Bijan Mustardson on that thing. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Bijan Robinson's been working out with 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey this offseason, as well as his brother Luke McCaffrey. Here's why that's only a good thing for the Falcons. Look, I think these two players, when Christian McCaffrey has been at his absolute best, he's been the best running back in football. He's been up there with what we've seen out of Saquon Barkley in recent years. He's very much a guy that can do anything with the ball in his hand, can do it all. Very intelligent player, played at Stanford, can run, block, receive, you name it. And I think for Bijan Robinson to be around a guy who has done this in the league for about a decade, coming into the league, after only 3 years in college at a Power 5 school at the time at Stanford, Power 4 now, you can learn a lot from him. I think also the fact that McCaffrey has also competed in NFC South when he first played with Carolina, I think that's a huge plus. And I think the one thing that I initially thought would have been a concern in him working out with McCaffrey is, look, McCaffrey is injury prone. He's missed at least 3 of his 10 years in the league, 9 or 10. He's missed ample time. He missed a bunch last year. He missed a bunch towards the end of his time there with Carolina, which is kind of why Carolina circled the drain, why he was eventually moved, I think during the 21 season, if I'm not mistaken. But you can learn vicariously through him. But I think in some ways, maybe some of the workout stuff that McCaffrey does doesn't help his body as much as he thinks it does. But again, he plays a very physical position, of running back, has to do a lot. So again, I think Robinson's coming in here with a far cleaner bill of health. You're looking at a guy that's entering his prime, whereas McCaffrey is exiting it, or already has exited it. So keep that in mind. And I think the other thing that's really, really key here is the Falcons of 49ers run essentially a similar version of the same offense. This is from the McVay-Shanahan tree. The biggest difference is the Falcons kind of run more of a McVay offense, whereas the 49ers run a Shanahan thing. And there is a contrast into how they decide to run the football. With a Shanahan team, it's there's going to be a fullback back there. You're going to run a little bit more pro set. This is basically dating back to when Mike Shanahan was the head coach of the Denver Broncos, with John Elway, Terrell Davis in the backfield, Mark Schlereth on the offensive line, Alex Gibbs is the O-line coach. That's kind of more along the lines with what the 49ers are running now. Very similar to what the Falcons ran back in 2015 and 16 when Shanahan was the OC. Now that Zach Robinson's calling the shots, and he's come over from, the Rams, learning under McVay and everything like that, you're kind of going to 11 personnel everybody to death. You're essentially got 3 wide receivers out there at all times. You got a running back who can do a little bit of everything and a tight end. And I think that's kind of where there's been some disconnect with regards to Kyle Pitts. He's a more advantageous, a better a scheme mismatch when you're running more with pro style with a fullback. He's basically a tight end playing the number 3 wide receiver. But in this such offense, the tight end's a tight end. So that's kind of been something there. But I think just being able to pick the brain of McCaffrey, being able to look around and be okay, what can I do to further accentuate, my game in the context of this offense of essentially the same roots. And I mean, a lot of teams in the NFL basically run some sort of variation of this. Trying to think across the board. I know the Seahawks are going to do it with Clint Kubiak. The Dolphins do it with Mike McDaniel. Kind of blanking on the top of my head, but there's so many people out there that are of the McVay and Shanahan tree. It could be half a league, could be more than half, could be about a quarter. But there's things that can translate across the board. If Bijan Robinson was putting in the work with somebody who was running like on Arthur Smith's offense with the with the Steelers. I mean, yes, he played Arthur Smith's offense, but you get what I'm saying. Like that's way more ground centric. That's a completely different attack versus what the Falcons are trying to do here under Zach Robinson's guidance and everything like that. So, I mean, there's a reason why I had this as a featured image, and I think it's good that like Robinson's putting himself out there to learn from the best of the best. Look, is Christian McCaffrey going to be destined for the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Maybe. I mean, he's got to be healthier. I think I looked it up. He only has 3 Pro Bowls, but like when he's been healthy, he's been fantastic. He's been an MVP caliber player, but like the wear and tear on his body has certainly hurt him over time. An unbelievable player at Stanford. But Derrick Henry has just had proven to be the healthier, the more longer career at this point of the two. That's apples to oranges in some capacities. Those are both 2 of the best running backs I've ever covered in my writing career for a decade now, college and pro and whatnot. But I'm very excited that Robinson is going out there and, taking it upon himself to pick the brains of other people out there. Because I think that there's something to be learned from being around Christian McCaffrey. Again, a guy who came into the Panthers and left Stanford, like once he left both of those teams, they got considerably worse. But then going to a team like the 49ers that has been mostly good since he's been there, maybe outside of last year, I think that like just kind of showing like what it takes to get to the playoffs and win playoff games. Because like the 49ers have been to the Super Bowl a couple of times, under Shanahan. I think only once with Purdy and McCaffrey, if I'm not mistaken. Again, it's my last day before I go on some vacation here. So, I'm kind of giving you guys the best I can on short notice today. But again, make sure you hit that like button on YouTube. I know YouTube's kind of been acting weird for me. Maybe it's acting weird for you. Smash that subscribe button as well. Again, we're at 300 now. I want to stay above 300. And if we can get to 420 or 500 or something like that before the start of the year, that'd be utterly fantastic. Again, once again, really appreciating all the engagement I've been getting from anyone and everyone with this show. We're going to see if we can try to do something during the season after games because you, the fans, deserve it. And I think we're going to have a really special year here. But I guess to really tie a bow on this with regards to Robinson working out with McCaffrey, this is what you want to see the best players in your team do. You want to see them assimilate and hang out with like other guys that like are their peers, contemporaries, guys that do things with them. Like you want to be part of the cool kids table. Like you want to be invited to these things. You don't want to be overlooked. And, and I think when you have a player like that who cuts through that everybody in the league knows outside of just Dirty Bird Nation, I think that's a really, really big deal. So we're going to move on to our next topic here with some blow the whistle. We're going to talk about a guy who I'm hoping the rest of the NFL knows, but I know him, you know him, and we got to see if the rest of the league is going to know about him a little bit more. Am I going to blow the whistle on this? Will Rook Horo have a breakout season year 2? And if so, what needs to happen for that to happen for the former Clemson star? I was very down on this pick. I thought it was kind of not one of our better picks last year, but there were moments down the stretch with Rook that I appreciated. So, you know what? I'm going to blow the whistle. Yes. I think he's going to have a breakout season in year 2 because I think the game has slowed down a little bit. Daniel Flick for On SI wrote about this a little bit, talking about what went into Rook's first year with the team. Again, he played at Clemson. And Clemson's always had really good defensive line players. Really, it's really been like a calling card for them throughout Dabo Swinney's time there in the Southland. But like, he got to pick the brain of fellow Clemson alumnus Grady Jarrett before he got released and signed with the Bears. He also had developed a pretty good rapport there with his rookie draft classmate, Brandon Dorlus out of Oregon. Again, the guys that weren't expected to contribute very much right away last year, but eventually they kind of earned their keep. And the reason I'm going to blow the whistle in the positive, like a train whistle, we're not going to hear a train whistle today, even though I'm at a different location. The reason why I'm going to do this is because I didn't realize he was dealing with an injury last year. And I think when you have that and your reps have been limited, you got to make the most of them. And, when there's more to be had and when there's particularly a leadership void there along the defensive line with Grady Jarrett going to the Bears, somebody's got to step up. And I also think that Raheem Morris, for being a defensive-minded head coach, for being a guy who I think cut his teeth more in the secondary, if you will. When he was with the Rams, it was all about the defensive line, and obviously, when you coach a all-time great like Aaron Donald, it makes things pretty easy for you there. I think Ulbrich coming in there, that could go either way, but I think just empowering Arroyo to make a bigger difference here would behoove the team. And again, this is when I pick these topics here with blow the whistle. I try to find something that is very much it could go either way. Like in the moment, I don't pick a side until like it happens. I was initially gonna blow it in the negative because like, look, if a guy's not productive one year or another year, like it's just that's the past. Like past results are the best indicator of future success, and he was not a productive player last year. But I think the other thing was like Clemson's a really good program in the ACC and college football, but they just have far better resources and a better tradition than so many other teams in their conference. So like Clemson players can really shine, but it's kind of like hit or miss if they're going to be able to make an impact in the NFL right away or at all. Like there is a learning curve to be had there. This isn't like guys, playing in some SEC schools or some Big Ten schools where like the competition's so good. We're like, okay, they're going to come in here, they're going to make something happen. I'm trying to find like who's like a really good example of this, like a program where like that's maybe at that level, like Georgia, Alabama, those guys tend to perform at a high level. But I would say a lot of times when a guy is pretty good at Purdue, like they've been playing up at a school that's not particularly good in the Big Ten, like if they resonate within Purdue and in the Big Ten, like they can come in here and make an impact. Clemson's kind of the antithesis of that, where like they've got so much working for them, but then you got to amp it up a little bit when you've kind of been coasting. But for the sake of being positive here, I will go with blow the whistle. Yes, like a train for Rick Herrero to have the breakout season. And I think really what this needs to happen is the other areas of the Falcons defense need to be firing on all cylinders. Like I'm not really expecting a whole hell of a lot from the defensive front seven. And I think the secondary has to be really good. And I think the linebacking core needs to tackle better, be a little more athletic. And this includes the pass rush, like guys that are coming in off the edge. I kind of group that more so along the lines of like edge rusher, outside linebacker, defensive end. Like I'm kind of talking more like, traditional like 3-4 defensive linemen where it's like you're in the middle of this and you got to make stuff happen. The one thing I did see, there was a play. I forget who the Falcons are playing. It might have been the Panthers. I could be mistaken. We were on the road outdoors. We're in the white jerseys a year ago. And he just went in and he just blew something up. And I think when you have a defensive lineman who has a knack for blowing things up, I'm always going to be in favor of that. Yes, there's guys out there who just go off script and ad-lib the whole time, like Ndamukong Suh. It made him a phenomenal college football player, but I think it did kind of cap his ceiling at being a very good player in the NFL because he wouldn't do it. He was kind of more of a freelancer. But when you have a guy like Fletcher Cox is one of my all-time favorite defensive tackles that I've seen, a guy that just made our lives living hell whenever we played the Eagles. He would do that. He did this to Mississippi State, but it also did it in a way that made his teammates better. I don't know if Rick Herrero has really got that high end of a talent of Fletcher Cox because I don't think most people do. But if he can be a guy that can go in there and be a disruptor and, take on 2 blocks, mess up the running game, allowing for opportunities for Leonard Floyd, Jalen Walker, James Pierce Jr., or Arnold Ebiketie, you name it, to make plays out on the edge and in the backfield, then I think that could be to the benefit of the Atlanta Falcons. So, yes, blow the whistle, positive. Rook, we're pulling for you, bro. All right, let's move on to the second half of our show. Let's come to you from the highest perch in Flowery Branch. Again, this is another one I go back and forth on with the preposition. Is the in or of? I write for a living, but like it's more of an opinion thing. So half the time I don't know what I'm talking about, but I know what I'm talking about here. So these next 3 posts to finish up the show or segments were based on articles I wrote on fanside.com last week. So definitely check them out. So I think Jeff Ulbrich has the potential to be a disappointment for this team, and I'm keeping an extra close eye on him as their defensive coordinator. Look, when this is not necessarily about him more so than it's about Raheem Morris and who he puts trust in. Look, when you hired Jimmy Lake to come over from LA, look, I know that when you're building your first staff, you got to get who you can get. But I knew in the moment when we hired him, like, this is not going to work. I usually have a pretty good idea of that in a professional sense. Even in my 10 years doing this with FanSide, like, I can generally tell, like, some of my colleagues, like, if it's going to work out or not. And that I can just tell. It's like every job is different. Maybe you have that intuition too. But with Jimmy Lake, I kind of felt like, okay, this is a guy who was a great defensive coordinator at Washington under Chris Peterson, an iconic head coach. He goes and he replaces Peterson after he retires. Jennifer Cohen, the athletic director there at the time, now at USC, empowered him. It's like, okay, let's promote the well-to-do coordinator. Well, anytime you're in the Pacific Northwest, those four schools of note, Washington State, Oregon State, if you go in that direction, you always get burned. Like, never promote your top assistant from within there. It's Jim Lambright, it's Jimmy Lake, it's Mark Helfrich. Whatever you do that, it just doesn't work out. We'll see what happens with Trent Bray there and Corvallis with the Beavers, but it doesn't typically work out. And then, so Lake was terrible head coach there at Washington, goes to the Rams and gets rehabilitated as an assistant. They bring him in here to be the defensive coordinator in a role that I thought that he'd be qualified for. What I saw was just a guy whose secondary got worse as the year went along. Maybe there was injuries there. They kind of played very sloppily. You can kind of see guys that weren't totally locked in. It was like, the offense is starting to figure out, and now the defense is pulling back. The team really wasn't in sync here. And I understand that Jeff Ulbrich had been on the Falcons staff under Dan Quinn with Raheem Morris from 15 to 20. He ultimately served as I think he was the linebackers coach. Again, he played linebacker in the aughts for the 49ers. That's what he did. I think he coached at UCLA prior to coming to the Falcons. He was the Falcons interim DC when Raheem Morris was the interim head coach. Then once that staff wasn't retained, he went and he became Robert Saleh's defensive coordinator for the New York Jets, replaced him as the interim head coach. Now he's back here in Atlanta. The thing for me that I just have some trepidation about is, maybe there are better candidates out there. And the two that I always go back to were Lou Anarumo and Matt Eberflus. Lou Anarumo, did phenomenal work there with the Bengals. Maybe they pulled back a little bit with Al Golden going to take over Notre Dame. Now he's back with the Bengals. This is a guy that helped really get the most out of Jesse Bates III. He's thriving for us here in Atlanta, thrive for the Bengals there under Anarumo. And I think if you would have gotten Anarumo, maybe that would have opened up the possibility to potentially trade for Trey Hendrickson. I kind of always felt that this guy was a head coach. I think he finished as runner-up to Jonathan Gannon with the Cardinals back in the day. And he goes to the Colts, and he's going to link up and be on Shane Steichen's staff. But I kind of feel that the Colts, it's a bit more chaotic than us. It's like they're trusting Daniel Jones to be the starting quarterback because there's doubt in the air when it comes to Anthony Richardson. And I don't think Anthony Richardson can play, but just too green, just too raw. But the fact that he went there as opposed to here, I'm like, maybe we missed out. And I don't know exactly where Matt Eberflus ended up. I'm gonna look this up real quick, just make sure I got this. Okay, so he's the defensive coordinator on the Dallas Cowboys. Again, I think he had been there before. He had been on the Colts before taking over the Bears. I thought he was a really good defensive mind when he was a defensive coordinator for both Indianapolis and Dallas previously. I think this is a big hire from Brian Schottenheimer on his staff. I think the Bears is just an incredibly chaotic organization, and I think unless you have the demeanor of Dave Wannstedt, it's just not going to work out for you. I don't know if Ben Johnson has that. I think he's trying to reinvent the wheel here, and he might get burned. But I kind of felt that those are guys that Raheem Morris and them interviewed, but he ultimately settled on the guy that he knew that was his friend. It's not, in life, it's all about connections. It's all about who you know. And you're only in the league or you're only in this job for as long as you've got your kingmaker. And maybe Raheem Morris will be Jeff Ulbrich's kingmaker. I have concerns about this. I kind of feel like anytime you go in a direction where you're hiring for the sake of familiarity and continuity, you're kind of settling. I kind of feel like you're reaching into one's past to solve a future solution. And look, this is probably one of the biggest things I learned in my adult life up to this point. you can't be chasing yesterday. You got to be locked into the moment of now, because nostalgia is a hell of a drug. And if you're in a situation where you're longing from yesteryear, maybe yesteryear wasn't as good as you think it is. It's always viewed through rose-colored glasses. And I think in life, for me, anytime that like I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to do in that moment, and I'm pretty busy, I'm tired a lot, but I feel like, I'm thriving in that moment. Where I think I get in trouble as a person, for me, like, is where like I'm trying to recreate something from yesteryear in a future timeline. It's just not going to work out because the same cast of characters aren't there, whatever it is. And then you end up disappointed. And then you wonder like why the next year or so isn't so great, and you got to rebuild it. But I've kind of gotten out of that cyclical nature in my life. That was something that used to plague me in my teenage years and early 20s. But I guess really to say it with Ulbrich here is he'll get scapegoated if the team doesn't make the playoffs. I don't know if Arthur's blank is going to really fire Raheem Morris after 2 years, or Terry Fontenot. Maybe I'm more in the line of thinking that could potentially happen. I mentioned this on last week's episode where like maybe we are getting ahead of ourselves a little bit with the playoff push. We're talented enough there, but I'm wondering if the coaching staff is good enough. I wonder if the front office is good enough. I think ownership's good enough, but like we got to be good in all areas here. And I still have some doubts about key front office and coaching personnel. And I think with Ulbrich here is like, I'm kind of wondering, like, if you're bringing in a guy who's a linebacker to kind of develop the pass rush, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But he was the guy that the Jets trusted, to be the interim. I don't think they were much better under him than under Robert Saleh. They were probably worse. And I think getting some of that Jet stink on you is probably not the best thing for anybody. So do you really want the gangrene of gangrene coming here into the highest perch of Flowery Branch and wreaking havoc on this team? Like, the Jets are like probably the only team in the NFL that's missed the playoffs more frequently than we have over the last 7 years. Like, again, I have trepidation there, and for good reason. That's not to say that I'm not rooting for Jeff Ulbrich to be good. I want to see him succeed. I want to see him be a reason why this team makes the playoffs. We have success. We have a home game in the Benz in January, when the playoffs for the first time ever. That would be so awesome. That's what I'm rooting for. We as fans of this team deserve this. But like, I just kind of thought that the Falcons could have done better. But I will say this. I will say this before I move on to the penultimate topic here. Maybe the other coaching candidates that I wanted didn't want to come here. Like that's always in play too. But like for the while, like I always kind of been under the impression it's like, yeah, we're going to interview X, Y, and Z for this, but we're really just going to hire Jeff Ulbrich anyway. And I think anytime the NFL or in coaching, like when you do that, where you just hire your friends, you get what you signed up for. That's how friends become enemies. Don't work with your friends. Yes, Cody Williams and I on False Start are really tight and everything like that. Like he'll be in my wedding party, but like we've really only hung out in conjunction at work, like mostly through Zoom and stuff like that. Like he lived in Atlanta when I lived in Chicago. But it's a professional working relationship that's blossomed in a good friendship and everything like that. But you got to keep your work and your life kind of separate to protect your mental health and everything like that. And we all know the Falcons have done a number on our mental health over the last several years. So enough with Jeff Ulbrich. Let's keep talking about some defense. Let's move on to our penultimate topic with a diamond in the rough. So I wrote about this really awesome post here for the NFL for fanside.com. Definitely check this out. It went live, I believe on Saturday. So I was tasked with looking at the late round pick on each NFL team most likely to find success. And for the Atlanta Falcons, there's only 2 late round picks. And it's either Jack Nelson or Billy Bowman Jr., who I ultimately went with for the Falcons, with Billy Bowman Jr., the former safety out of Oklahoma, 4th round pick. I believe he came off the board number 118 overall. That's my favorite 3-digit number, as indicated by my Twitter account and everything like this. So the biggest thing that I like about this is he's being groomed to be a nickel corner. really kind of push D. Alford in some capacities. I think being able to play in the same secondary with Jesse Bates the third, AJ Terrell is a good look. Mike Hughes has been here for a while. I would also say that, trying to think exactly how to say this intelligently, but like this is kind of the position group that Raheem Morris thrives in. This is what he played. This is what he knows the best. This is the position group that Terry Fontenot played at Tulane. This is the position group he knows the best. So, and I think if the Falcons have a good secondary, and I'm not talking about having a Baltimore Ravens secondary where I think it's going to be ridiculously good, and that's why they're my way too early pick to win the Super Bowl and get Lamar Jackson, a first ballot Hall of Fame level caliber player. But I think with Bowman, also being in the same draft class as Xavier Watts, and to some degree, Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr., also Kobe Bryant, undrafted cornerback out of Kansas. This has been a draft. This has been an offseason for the Falcons where they've just really made it a point to get more dudes and get better and younger and faster and quicker and just more proven on defense across the board. And I'm all in favor of that. They recognize that's an issue, and they're doing everything in their power to try to rectify that. Is it going to work out? I'm kind of dubious of that, but do I want it to? Oh, absolutely. Why would I not? But as far as like with Bowman here, like you got a guy who, thrived in the Big 12, made the transition to the SEC. And then like now he's probably going to change positions in some capacities here to play for the Falcons. But I would say like for the most part, when it comes to him, you're looking at a guy who they're not putting too much on his plate. And I think that hurts a lot of rookies, regardless of what round you went in, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or if you were undrafted. Like, earn your role, build confidence, because the NFL is short for not for long. Half the league is undrafted. An average career is only 3 years here. And even though Bowman has a 4-year contract, it'll be interesting to see if he does play out all 4 years in Atlanta. I'm bullish on it. I think playing for a defensive-minded head coach that I have a lot of respect for, and being a defensive mind in Brent Venables, he doesn't really do it for me as a head coach, but like his defensive coordinator, he was awesome. I mean, maybe he crossed paths with Arroyo at Clemson before he took over at Oregon, or no, at Oklahoma and Norman. Yeah, Oregon. OU. I got stumbled on that there, but I feel like the Falcons secondary is the strength of the defense, and I'm still kind of down on our front seven quite a lot. Maybe we'll grow into it. Maybe it'll be better, but like it's all lining up. Okay, play for a defensive-minded head coach in college. Played in a team that switched leagues, went from a good league to a great league, from the Big 12 and the SEC in Oklahoma. Mid-round pick. You're the fourth defensive player of 4 drafted by the Falcons. You have a Hall of Fame level player in Jesse Bates III at safety. You got a Pro Bowl caliber player at AJ Terrell at cornerback. It all kind of seems to be pulling in the same direction for Billy Bowman Jr. to have success. So yeah, I'm pulling for that. I'm pulling for that in favor here. Again, like there were other teams out here that were a little more fun, more difficult to write about because I had to look for 4, 5, 6 picks, whereas the Falcons really had 2 picks in day 3. But yeah, Billy Bowman Jr. is the pick I got here, more so than Jack Nelson, because Jack Nelson, it's going to be like, it may work out. He may be a guy that could replace either Jake Matthews or Caleb McGarry out on the edge, but we got to give that some time. So that was really the only 2 guys I could pick from. But I think Bowman's ability to be on the field, in dime packages could come to fruition more so than saying Nelson be a swing tackle right away. But again, what do I know? I just love the Falcons. I'm just pulling for this team so badly. And I'm pulling for this last thing here. We're going to go on to finish the show with some Koo Koo Ka Choo. I think Younghoe Koo is poised to have a bounce back season for the Falcons. And I read about this for fansided.com. 7 bounce back candidates who proved last year was an outlier. And I had Koo as the 7th of 7 on this list. I had other guys like L'Jarius Sneed, the cornerback for the Titans. I had Buccaneers safety Antoine Winfield Jr. I had Christian McCaffrey with the 49ers. Trevor Lawrence of the Jaguars. Isaiah Pacheco of the Chiefs. And Dak Prescott of the Cowboys, I think, were the other guys on the list. But what I wrote for Koo was like, he spent the bulk of his career with the Falcons. Yes, he may have struggled initially out of Georgia Southern with the Chargers, but he's been sure-footed the last several years. And last year, he only made 73.5% of his field goals. And I mean, he's made like 87% since 2019. Was a trying to think what the word is, all Pro Bowl guy in 2020. And Koo had been dealing with like some sort of like hip issue, dealing with some injuries. I think with him is we just got to be smarter about this in terms of like asking where to kick. Look, Koo has nails inside of 50, but he was missing stuff like in the 40s. I'm like, oh, that's odd. That's not him. Like Morton Anderson was kind of the same way too. Like if it's a short thing, he's going to make it. He's going to be accurate there. When you're asking for him to really boom it, it's not really his cup of tea. He did make that insanely long kick to beat the Saints back in week 4, and I'll always be thankful of that. But I think for a guy that's a little bit smaller, with the torque he's got to put on his leg, it doesn't come off as clean. So maybe that hurts him in some capacities. I also think there's two or three other things working in his favor. One, like last year is kind of the anomaly for him. And, we'll bounce back and probably make about 85% of his kicks this year, which, again, it doesn't seem like a whole big step up, but like, that 12% difference between 73 and 85, like that's how you win or lose games. I would also say that they have a guy from like the developmental thing from Germany named Lenny Craig, it's a person, Lenny Craig coming over, and he could be on the roster because he's a developmental guy. And I think that will help. It'll push Koo to be better, but also not having too much pressure where like he's going to lose his job because, Craig's here. It's a developmental guy. There's not just one spot for a kicker. Like there's two for this team, and it won't hurt this. It won't hurt the Falcons here. But I think the other thing that really helps here is I think the offense is going to be more. There's going to be greater levels of continuity. It's another year of Zach Robinson's offense. It's another year that everybody's playing in this offense. And even though Michael Penix Jr. only had 3 starts last year, he's getting all the reps of the ones. Kirk Cousins is still on the roster, so he knows the offense too. What I'm getting at is I think that the field goals are going to be closer to the uprights than further away. There will be field goal opportunities to be had, maybe not as many as we would think, but also more. Like more easier field goal opportunities, like more extra points, more opportunities to gain confidence. The offense is like you don't necessarily feel like I got to carry the offense because we get stuck in between the 20s and we can't punch it in. Whereas like if your offense is better, okay, I can make the 30-yard field goal, no problem. Oh, you need guys to make 45? I got this. Okay, you guys really need to make me a 50-yard field goal? I can do this too. So I think he'll be healthier. I think that he has the right amount of competition. I think last year was an anomaly. And I also think that the offense is going to be better. And I think when all those things are pulling in the same direction here, Koo is probably the biggest bounce back candidate for me here. So yeah, that's kind of what we got here today. Make sure I got this absolutely correct before I move on here. This was episode 48 of the Blogging Dirty podcast. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow the show on YouTube at Blogging Dirty FS. You can follow Blogging Dirty on Twitter at Blogging Dirty. Be sure to watch, like, rate, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give us a 5-star review. Again, tell all your friends about this show. We're really growing here. I really appreciate the growth we've been having the last couple of weeks here. It's been fun to watch. Makes me really excited. I could have not done a show today. I said last week, like, yeah, I'm taking this week off, but that's not what this is about. When you put in, when you put in the work and you make things happen here, like, you're rewarded for your efforts. You have, the fruits of your labor, so to speak. But yeah, like, subscribe, review, do everything. Just read all of my content there on fanside.com. Again, I cover college football, the NFL, and the Atlanta Braves mostly. Try to write from the lens of a Atlanta sports fan. That's kind of what I've done for my professional career, and it seems to be working out just fine here. But yeah, if you can follow me on Twitter at Buhler118, read everything on fanside.com, read everything on Blogging Dirty. If you want to read NFL content, go to NFL Spin Zone. AT all day. Just consume more fan-sided content. If you want to see stuff with the Mini Media umbrella, on SI is great too. Same with Sports Illustrated, Players Tribune. We got it all, man. We really got it. We really got it going here. So yeah, that's my Twitter handle. So be sure to follow me on there. Again, I'm going to be out of commission the next couple of days. I'll be working 4th of July. We'll be back on the show for Wednesday before I take some more PTO, and then we'll be back. So it'll be normal time next week on Wednesday, and then the week after that, and then will be pretty much locked in here for football season. So that's kind of what's going on here. But once again, thanks for listening, and this is the Blog and Dirty Podcast.